Is South Sudan on the brink of a new civil war? In July 2011, South Sudan became the world's newest nation, but celebrations soon turned to violence as the country sank into a brutal 5-year civil war. But while the sides eventually reached a peace deal, the uneasy truce has now collapsed, leading to clashes. So, what exactly lies behind this story, and could South Sudan really be about to return to war? Hello and welcome. If you're new to the channel, my name is James Ker-Lindsay, and here I take an informed look at international relations, conflict, security, and statehood. We tend to think that civil wars end when the sides reach a peace agreement. The warring parties sign a deal and then begin the long and arduous process of reconciliation and reconstruction. However, all too often, these agreements merely pause the fighting. A period of calm is followed by renewed conflict. This can be due to various factors. Sometimes the root cause of the conflict, such as ethnic or religious tensions, disputes over resources, or economic and social exclusion, remain in place. At other times, dissident factions undermine peace, sparking a return to violence. But sometimes the return to war is caused by lingering hostility between the supposedly former foes. A good case in point is South Sudan. Just 2 years after becoming independent in 2011, it collapsed into a brutal civil war as the country's leadership split. However, while an agreement eventually brought the warring sides together, it's been an uneasy peace. As splits have again opened up between the country's top leaders, a series of attacks mark the possible start of what many now believe could be a renewed civil war. The Republic of South Sudan is located in East Africa. Landlocked and covering approximately 650,000 square kilometres, or around 250,000 square miles, it's bordered by Ethiopia to the east, Kenya, Uganda and the Democratic Republic of Congo to the south, and the Central African Republic to the west. To the north lies Sudan. Its population is believed to be around 12 million. While this comprises over 60 different ethnic groups, the two dominant communities are the Dinka and the Nuer. Situated in the northwest of the country, the Dinka represent around 35% of the population. Meanwhile, the Nuer, representing around 15%, are located mainly in the northeast. Most of the population is Catholic or Anglican Christian, followed by local religions. While South Sudan has a long and rich history, our story begins in the first half of the 19th century when Ottoman and Egyptian forces pressed southwards, establishing control over what is now Sudan. However, after an Islamic uprising broke out in 1881, raising concerns about the security of the newly built Suez Canal, Britain sent in troops, and Sudan came under Anglo-Egyptian rule. From the start, it was a complex situation. Although Sudan was formerly a single colonial unit, it consisted of two very distinct parts. The 6 northern provinces, which made up around 3/4 of the population, were predominantly Arab and Muslim. In contrast, the 3 southern provinces included various sub-Saharan tribes. While many of these followed local religions, as missionaries reached into the area, increasing numbers converted to Christianity. All this would come to a head after the Second World War. As British decolonisation began, a debate emerged regarding Sudan's future. While the North wanted independence, many in the South feared domination by their northern neighbours. To this end, they called for the new state to be based on a federal structure that would provide them with extensive self-rule. And if this wasn't possible, they demanded their own separate country, a position resolutely rejected by the North. All of this led to increasing tensions. Fearing that it was losing control, Britain now swiftly decided to withdraw. 6 months later, on the 1st of January 1956, the Republic of Sudan gained its independence. From the start, tensions between the communities grew, especially after the central government was overthrown by a military coup in 1958. As the Muslim Arab North attempted to extend its control over the South launched an insurgency. While at first this was contained, by the end of the 1960s, the situation was changing. With support from Israel, which was growing increasingly concerned about Sudan's close ties to its then archenemy, Egypt, southern forces began to gain the upper hand. Following international mediation, the sides reached a peace agreement in 1972. Under the terms of the deal, the South would gain extensive self-rule. But little changed in the years that followed. The North still dominated, and on top of this, other significant differences now emerged. Notably, as the northern leadership became overtly religious, it tried to impose Islamic Sharia law on the Christian South. At the same time, strains emerged following the discovery of oil on the boundary between the North and South. As a result, in September 1983, the Sudanese government unilaterally cancelled the peace agreement, plunging the country back into a new civil war. This time, though, the South was far better prepared. Under its leader, Dr. John Garang, an agricultural economist and former colonel in the Sudanese army, the Sudan People's Liberation Army, the SPLA, quickly seized control of most of the rural areas in the south. But while the war ebbed and flowed over the next 2 decades, by the turn of the millennium, fatigue was setting in on both sides. 20 years of fighting had left over 2 million dead in what was now Africa's longest civil war. Meanwhile, the broader geopolitical situation was also changing. Following 9/11, the United States stepped up pressure on the Islamist regime of the country's long-standing dictator, Omar al-Bashir. All this paved the way for new negotiations, and in early 2005 the sides signed a comprehensive peace agreement giving the South considerable autonomy. Crucially, they also agreed that a referendum would be held after 6 years. This would provide the South with a fundamental choice. It could either accept the new power-sharing arrangement and remain within Sudan, or it could break away and become independent. In January 2011, almost 4 million South Sudanese went to the polls to vote on whether to keep the arrangement. Unsurprisingly, almost 98% voted for independence, and just 6 months later, on the 9th of July 2011, South Sudan formally declared independence, becoming the 193rd member of the United Nations just 5 days later. I hope you're finding this useful. If so, please do give it a like and perhaps consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. Thanks so much, and now back to the video. While there were initially high hopes for peace and stability after half a century of conflict, the euphoria quickly faded. From the start, the new country faced serious political, economic and social challenges. In addition, corruption and ethnic favouritism led to increasing factionism across the ruling Sudan People's Liberation Movement, the SPLM. This was highlighted by the deep divisions between the country's top leaders. On the one hand, there was President Salva Kiir, an ethnic Dinka who had assumed leadership after Garang died in 2005. Meanwhile, on the other side was the Vice President, Riek Machar, an ethnic Nuer. Amidst rumours of an impending coup, in July 2013, Kiir dismissed the government, including Machar. As the ruling party now split into 2 factions, the SPLM in government, led by Kiir, and the SPLM in opposition, led by Machar, South Sudan descended into a bitter civil war. Despite its political roots, the fighting soon gained an ethnic dimension, pitting Dinka against Nuer. As a result, an estimated 400,000 people were killed and millions more displaced in a conflict that was marked by brutal atrocities and a widespread famine. Meanwhile, although international efforts to broker peace led to multiple ceasefires and temporary agreements, these were repeatedly broken by the sides. In the end, a new agreement was reached in September 2018. Under the terms of the deal, Machar was reinstated as first vice president under Kiir. At the same time, it also contained other vital elements. These included a new constitution, efforts to unite the factional militias within the army, and promises of elections. However, despite the promises, little of this took place. Meanwhile, critics argued that the agreement neglected deeper issues, such as the serious ethnic divisions that had emerged. In addition, the country continued to be plagued by economic instability and humanitarian crises. As a result of all this, the relationship between Kiir and Machar and their respective factions remained tense, leading to occasional clashes. All this came to a head in March 2025. Accusing Machar of inciting rebellion, Kiir ordered that the Vice President be placed under house arrest. While many international observers, including the United States and the United Nations, strongly condemn Machar's detention, seeing it as a dangerous escalation of the situation, the government refused to back down. As a result, the opposition claimed that the peace deal was finished. As expected, all this saw a dramatic rise in tensions and further clashes between the groups, a situation further exacerbated with news that neighbouring Uganda had sent its forces into South Sudan to support the Kiir government. All this has in turn prompted the UN's representative, Nicholas Haysom, to warn that the country is teetering on the brink of a return to full-scale civil war. Such fears have been most recently stoked by a deadly bombing of a hospital run by the international aid charity Médecins Sans Frontières, which killed at least 7 people and injured 20. While it's unclear who carried out the attack, with the sides blaming each other, MSF has condemned the attack as a deliberate violation of international law. So, is South Sudan on the verge of a return to full-scale civil war? At this stage, the situation is obviously unclear. Efforts to mediate the crisis are still ongoing. For example, Kenya dispatched its former Prime Minister to facilitate dialogue between the factions. However, the situation certainly remains precarious, with the 2018 peace agreement under significant strain, if not entirely broken. And it's for these reasons that the international community continues to urge both leaders to recommit to the peace process to prevent a return to widespread conflict. But given past experience, hopes are low. With such a long history of violence and factional fighting, there are fears that South Sudan may well be on the brink of another devastating civil war. I hope you found that useful. If so, here are some more videos that you might find useful. Thanks so much for watching, and see you in the next video.